Hello, everyone. Nice to have you.
We're just going to tell you briefly a little bit about ourselves. My name is Judith Luman, and I have been in Montessori for almost 29 years. I came to it through my own children, made me be interested in it from my business career. I am the director of the Duhovka Montessori teacher training program, elementary. And I also currently am working at Warsaw Montessori School as the head of school in Warsaw, Poland.
My name is Jennifer Varbanov, and I currently live in Norway. I've been working in Montessori for about 23 years. I am the early childhood level director for Duhovka Institute, AMS training, and also work as the early childhood academic director for Bambini Montessori Barnehage, which is a children's house here in Norway. Okay. And as you can see, it is very much on purpose that we have some of the math that's appearing in some of the images from nature, because that is really a big part of what we're seeing. We're seeing all of those elements in nature and how they directly correlate with materials in the environment, and also that mathematical mind that Montessori talks about. So it is not a coincidence when we see some of these images, because there are so many things in nature that when we stop up, we will see the connection. So Montessori said, let us give the child a vision of the universe. The universe is an imposing reality and an answer to all questions. We shall walk together on this path of life, for all things are part of the universe, and we are all connected to each other to form one whole unity. And so, as you can see, just from the youngest of children, we're looking at a deeper awareness and how they're absorbing their environment, and how that's also setting the stage for a deeper understanding later in life of mathematic qualities, nature, science, ecology. You can add to that, I'm sure, Judy. But we want to see the world, and we want the children to see all of the beauty, and to give them the time to have that.
And what I would add to this, just for those of you that are new to Montessori, because I know some of you are, that if you're interested in really learning about the cosmic education piece for elementary age children, especially, this Montessori book is one of the best that really speaks to cosmic education for the elementary child. So I recommend it for everybody to educate the human potential. Okay, so to start our presentation, we really wanted to just ground everybody in what is cosmic education, because it is a big word, or that a lot of people don't understand, whether you're Montessorians or not. When you're a Montessorian and you're in training or you're learning about it, it's quite large. There's a lot of information to gather, a lot of information to take in, and then to find out how to make it work in your classroom or in your home. So we're just going to kind of give a little definition to what it is. And Montessori said that cosmic education is the foundation for everything that we're doing. It is our grounding. When we look at it, we talk about relationships. So it is the relationships between one thing and another, or it's relationships between many things and many other things. So how is everything connected? Or a Montessori term would be interconnected. It's important that we think in an interconnected way. And oftentimes we have to reach out, because we're not used to thinking that way. We're not used to finding everything we can to connect things in nature to ourselves, to each other, to the children. So it's the study and the approach of relationships and these connections. It's also, how do we develop our internal environment? So that's what's inside of us, the way that we think, the way that we feel. And how do we work to connect and develop our external environments? And Jen will make a couple of comments about that, I think, in a minute. And most of all, a lot of people that are not knowledgeable in Montessori, when we say cosmic education, they immediately think we're talking about space or only specifically the universe. But we're talking beyond that. We're talking about preparing children to understand what happened before us, what's happening now, and what's going to be in the future, because all of those things will create that future. The connections to the past to now is what's going to bring us into our future. We also, as Montessorians, go from the big to the small. We don't start with where we are in the small piece. We start from the universe. And we want children to have the awe of this beautiful world. And how do we get there? How do we connect with them?
So just going to move that away. So our relationship with the earth involves something more than pragmatic use, academic understanding, or aesthetic appreciation. A truly human intimacy with the earth and the entire natural world is needed. Our children should be properly introduced into the world in which they live. And so this is the words of cultural historian Thomas Berry, and he recognized the deep spirituality in the universe and the creation of humans as a pivotal role, having a pivotal role within it. And he suggested that that intimacy and spirituality connects humanity in a single earth community. So he talked a lot about that and the type of individuals and the type of humans that it's going to take to really continue this great earth community. Our role, our human role, which he called the great work, it is really about caring for the earth and everything that's come and describing also that work of our cosmic task. So as we're starting right from the beginning, even from that infant and toddler environment, the children are adapting, their organisms really are adapting to the environment, and it's all creating the type of person that they're going to be. So even in the youngest ages, we're considering this like cosmic thinking. So it's about our approach in the environment, how we see the child, how the child is within a space that's really prepared for them, filled with nature and natural aspects that they can study, and with plenty of time to reflect. So the study of the universe includes the study of the flow of the birth of and death of stars, this great dance of a miraculous creation, and really the intense and amazing process from which Earth came alive. So we're always setting kind of those exciting moments of experimentation in the environment. We're trying to really take these large concepts that can be considered abstract, like Judy said, and really making them concrete within the environment and isolating each of their beautiful elements so that the children are able to reflect and experiment and be inspired and really see their role within the environment. Mathematical cosmologist Brian Swim and Thomas Berry, they describe that the Kenozoic era would be one that is about to close, and really that we may be embarking upon a new birth, a new era of a more Ecozoic era. So really thinking about the depths of ecology.
I love that term, Ecozoic era.
I know, it's exciting. So moving on. So Brian Swim, he says, it was out of the dynamic of cosmic celebration that we were created in the first place. We are to become celebration and generosity, burst into self-awareness. What is the human? The human is a space, an opening where the universe celebrates its existence. And so this is all very exciting. It is a celebration, this cosmic work, and we need to remember that it should stay an inspiring part of our work. It should be the big vision. Oftentimes, people get caught up in the everyday, the practical activities, and those can be important. But if we don't have sight of the grand vision, then it kind of can be meaningless. So in our entire approach in the Montessori environment, it's not just about the materials that they may be able to see or work with, or knowing how to present one particular lesson. It is rather about our entire approach, all of these intangible aspects that are within the environment. So I would suggest really taking that reflective approach to in your own thinking of, why am I here? What empowered me to go into a Montessori environment? What was my inspiration? And hold on to that when you're working, because this is the big picture. And it's when the parent is going to have a new baby, and they're thinking about all of this beautiful life growing inside, and envisioning everything that's happening. And then the child is born, and all of a sudden it becomes that, what time did they go to sleep? What time did they change their diapers? And what is their feeding schedule? And sometimes people get lost in that. But I think that we need to work to keep a grasp on what is actually the big vision, the big picture. And so in cosmic education, we want to keep an eye on that big picture. So our consciousness begins to be enlightened with the concept and understanding that we are all interrelated. It's an exciting idea. The environment is filled with organisms that are having relationships with each other, and every single one is having an effect on life, on their life, and on what's going to happen in the future. So when you came into this talk this evening, you were one person, but just having had an experience, you'll be a different person when you leave, because that's how life is, and that's what's happening at all times. So our impact is quite great.
Could it be that the study of science will aid humanity in discovering the qualities of the unknown? So this is one of our questions for you. Perhaps internally and externally, is this what we think that will help us in the future? So the holistic study of the universe may guide our exploration into deep knowledge and awareness of our place, who we are in this big world. But what are the necessary elements in life, in your classrooms, in your home, for this exploration to take place? This is one of probably the biggest dilemmas for Montessorians, whether you're at home or whether you're in a classroom, is finding a way for this to happen. And so the most important thing is the time necessary to allow this interconnection and this seeing, and we'll talk about that in a minute. How are you going to do that? How are you going to enrich your children in your class or your children at home, so that they have the time to make the connection with the earth? As Jen referred to before, we're in a different world now. We hurry through many things, and we forget to stop and to take that time. Also, we need to teach our children how to reflect upon what they're seeing, what they're feeling, what they're experiencing. And we start very simple, and then it can go a little bit deeper with the older children with more writing. So we will talk about that. And also the ability to be open and to think openly and to share thoughts. We need to enable our young people, the young children in our lives, to find a way to share what they're thinking, and to do it in a way that it's not judged, but it's welcomed and it's listened to, and you support them in one way or another. These are some of the things that get lost in the hurries of our everyday life in the classroom or at home. So we have to also, as the parents or the educators, we have to find a way to let go of some control And that's not always easy for us, is to let go of control, and to help our students have that contact with nature on a daily basis.
Mhm. Yeah, so really, we may wonder, might human connection and relationships to the cosmos develop our inner spirit? And is it the consciousness that is a spiritual awareness?
So we have to think about that. We have to consider that openness and that importance of inspiring wonder. And one of the things that's a really just a wonderful way to approach it with children is to use the term, I wonder, I wonder, when they come to you and they ask you something, really, I wonder, instead of giving an answer, instead of telling them the answer, but putting it back with the child. I wonder, let's explore that. Use a different terminology and a different personality with them so they feel empowered to make that next step to understand and to learn. And we also have to show children how we are responsible for what we do. So we have natural consequences, and how we are very grateful for what the world offers us every minute, every day. Even when sometimes we don't feel that way, we need to be the person that honors that with our children. And then sometimes it helps us as teachers to also reflect on honoring that.
So this moves on to some talks about spirit also. John Gowan, who is from Cornell University, he says spirit subsists in the connections between things. Human spiritual awareness is our self-conscious connection to the universe. So when we think about spirit, we're really thinking a lot about connecting, a deeper awareness, and those of the relationships and interconnectivity between everything, and also creating a deeper understanding. When we study something or we observe something, we become more aware of it. So if you were, for example, to just sit down in the forest and start staring at a leaf, then you would also be able to see all of the delicate intricacies that you may otherwise not see. Because like Judy said, we are moving quickly through life, and oftentimes we're not making that connection with nature and actually seeing what's occurring. And that's part of what's building our spiritual self, is really coming into connection with that deeper understanding, and also seeing that there is so many things that are very unique and shared throughout nature. When we look, for example, in the mountains and in the clouds, we all of a sudden start discovering mathematical beauty as well. We start seeing fractals, for example. When we look at the pine cone, we see suddenly the Fibonacci sequence if we follow the spiral, and if we follow it the other way, we see the opposite. So it's all of these unique understandings that actually draw us into mathematics, science, art, language. Nature has within it that an entire interdisciplinary learning. So everything we can do in Montessori, we can do in the forest. So I think it's about really understanding that everything that has occurred before us has an impact on what will happen in the future, and that we have a direct impact as members of the Earth community on nature, and that everything exists there. We just need to open our eyes, reflect, and really observe, really truly observe. So I just want to let go. So when we look here, we know that like humans, botanic and other zoologic life appear in appear aware of survival. So there are many stories to support this. And I would suggest that people really read Thomas Berry's work, Brian Swim, Fritjof Capra, Francisco Varela. These are people who have really come into that deep understanding of nature and nature as life. So what we know is that there are stories and experiences that are passed down through generations, and they appear to develop individuals and societies. And it appears to be how humans understand the world and how the world changes. So when we're looking at nature, we're also looking at the passion of animals. Like Brian Swim talks a lot about as how there is a pre-conscious preparation, for example, of a fir tree. How many pine cones or how many cones that it's going to create is securing the growth for and the survival of the next generation. So those are things that are innate. So there are many things that are occurring in nature that, if studied, we can see that we have a direct connection with. And if we look at, like, animals, botanic and other zoologic life appear aware of survival. For example, male animals will work to impress the females. The females will choose the male that will, have the most offspring or help with the most offspring. So it's a sensibility in the construction of our DNA for all life, and it aids in the development of individuals and societies. So it appears to be that how humans understand the world and how the world changes, it's about being aware of similarities and these deep innate connections. And the more that society separates itself from nature, the more isolated we become, and the more really unaware and less community builders we become. So by connecting more with the earth and with really the universe and our awareness of nature throughout, we gain a much greater understanding. So also nature guides us when we look close. So just to take a small peek at the beginning of life, when we think about impacts, because we are talking about some quite abstract things now tonight, but also we need to land it into the classroom. So why do we prepare our environments the way that we do? What is important to have in the environment? Because we know that nature is guiding us. So if we take that closer look at human development, it is this incredible dance of between natural endowments. What did someone come before with their historical DNA and their interaction and relationships with the environment? So we're constantly adapting, especially from really conception to 6 years old, always adapting to the environment. So the fetal brain, for example, produces many, many neurons, of which some are eliminated. Some are having spontaneous outbreaks of electrical activity, and they're strengthened by connections and stimulated by activity. If something is not used, it will experience atrophy. So that's important to think about. Just like our muscles, just like when we're exercising, if we stop, it's going to experience atrophy. So after birth, the brain experiences this big explosion, and all these new connections are made. However, those that are not exercised or that do not have experience, those are things that get pruned off. So if we think about that, every child in the world can speak every language, has all of the sounds able to be used. However, we see that if that child doesn't exercise that really in the first year of life even, it begins to deteriorate or experience atrophy very quickly. So our experience spiritually, emotionally, physically in the environment has everything to do with the way that we're going to develop. It's really important in how the brain's going to be wired. So when we who work with children prepare the environment, we need to be looking at an environment that's rich with experiences, thoughtful experiences, experiences for independence, textures, for example, for the youngest children. All of this that's bringing them into connection. Children should be on their stomachs, making the crossing the midline. They should be working on touching grass, smelling the leaves, having nature around them, and having life around them, taking care of animals as well as they can, for example. There's so many things to see. So Montessori said the senses are organs for the apprehension of images of the external world necessary for the mind, just as the hand is the organ for grasping material needed by the body. So she wrote this this was in Discovery of the Child. And so I'm thinking about how important it is that we are presenting the children to the world. We're introducing the entire world to them. And of course, it advances through the curriculum, but we need to be articulating clear language. We need to have eye contact. They need to feel that we're in connection. So we're showing them meaningful experiences with nature. We're allowing them to feel temperature, to smell everything that's out in nature, and we're really allowing them to explore, because the brain appears to be continuously organizing and reorganizing based on adaptation to experiences in the environment. So I think that these are all extremely important factors that we need to be considering. And Fritjof Capra, he talked about the theory of autopoiesis, and I think this is important as well, is that actually structural changes happen to systems and organisms based on their environment. So an organism is consistently changing based on their environment. So we can think about how incredibly important that is.
I think, Jen, just to comment on that conversation you just were having and looking at your pictures, it just reminds me of the beauty that happens here in Europe with small children, and how the connection with nature starts quite young in some countries, where children go outside and they go for walks when it's freezing outside. But some places they even put them in all wrapped up in their, not called a stroller, pram maybe, in the very cold weather, and let them take their naps out on the patio or outside to make that connection with weather and their area, what they're experiencing, because then it becomes part of who they are. I think that's wonderful, actually.
Yes, and exactly. And they're breathing fresh air. Outdoor air is so healthy, and we know that. And that has so many fundamental aspects of even being able to calm ourselves, is just being in connection with nature. And in that connection, we really are able to have a different kind of aura about ourselves, and a kind of way of relaxing ourselves. There's much scientific experimentation or exploration in that area. And we look also at the 3 to 6 environment, the early childhood environment, and there the children are also out in nature. And you can see I chose some of these images here because this outdoor work that we're doing by exploring and observing, you can notice that some of these designs here will remind us of materials in the environment: the metal insets, the geometric solids, the knobbed cylinders. All of these kinds of geometric designs have tremendous beauty and art, geometry, of course, mathematical design, and you can really see that balance between math and science and art and nature that's consistently occurring with the dance between the materials indoors and the actual use and study of life outdoors. It's so important. So the materials support the environment and in a multidisciplinary and holistic way. So that's what we're looking at. And that's really sowing the seeds to cosmic thinking that prepares the child for cosmic education in the elementary environment. So each element in nature can be explored through sensorial, through math, language, geography, and the sciences. But by seeing it in a multidisciplinary way, we're strengthening knowledge because we're seeing things that might be occurring in one area of the environment that's now occurring in another area, and it's sparking a new level of interest. And as we're studying life and as we're studying science, we have such a short time tonight, but there's so many things we'd love to cover. But you see scientific theory, for example, chaos theory. And in nature, just like when we see the birds flying outdoors, all of a sudden they'll come to a new organization. It will look like chaos, and then they become organized. It's something, bifurcation occurs where everything starts settling again. And then you have this new level of creativity and a new organization. And that's something that is a phenomenon that happens in the clouds. And we call that a phenomenon, just like when we're observing. It's something that occurs before our eyes. And for those of us working in a Montessori environment with a 3-hour work period, we also experience that in the movement of our humans and our environment. And so you might be experiencing that the environment feels a little bit up here and a little bit chaotic, some people will say, but wait, just wait, because the same process of bifurcation will occur. And by letting go and not feeling like we have to control the situation and letting nature have its flow, then things will settle, and then there usually will occur a new level of creativity where the children are working at an even higher level. So right when people are ready to give up on the 3-hour work cycle, that's when you need to wait. And that's when this magical moment happens. And it really coincides with that flow of chaos theory. So there are many theories that could be looked at in terms of cosmic, like quantum theory. All of these are worth making a correlation between the Montessori environment and of course, and nature, science. Oop, something just occurred here. Let's see. I don't know what that is. Let's see if I can make that work. There we are.
Okay, one of the things we wanted to say to you at the beginning, and it slipped our minds, was actually what was our goal for you at the end of this time. And one of my goals was that at the end of this time, you would walk away with a new thought process, possibly, on looking at nature and how you are going to connect that with your children, whether they're your home children or whether they're your classroom. But how are you going to do something different than you've done before? And how will you look at things differently? Because that is the goal of cosmic education. We are the ones right now that have the ability to support these students to make those connections. And I love that Jen talked about going back and making our connection. Also, I think that as adults, we forget that it's important for us to find that way to also relax. And if we can find that way, then we can support the students in our environment. If we can't find that way, then we can't really support the students, because students, as you all know, can see right through you, and they can tell you when you're happy, they can tell you when you're sad, they definitely know your feelings. So really, I hope you leave us this evening just with a new look on, even looking outside if it's raining or snowing, what can you do for your students today that would help them to get in touch with what's going on outside. So philosophical goals. This is to stimulate the appreciation of the earth and for us to honor the earth. So we have to bring that to our students. We have to show them this beautiful leaf. We have to show them how the water trickles between the stones in the path. And if you do that, they will go deeper with that. The younger children, it's the tinier things. The older children will then reach out and look for a bigger stream or a bigger path, or they will compare the leaves. But we are the models of that. We also have to develop an awareness of our own human common cosmic task. And in just a minute, I'm going to talk about elementary and what that can look like. And then developing compassion. Compassion doesn't always come naturally for everybody. And if it does, it can still be developed more deeply. So it's about the way that we work with our students or the children, and we help them to see feeling, to actually articulate what feelings feel like, and to articulate how to support others that maybe have feelings that aren't so nice right now. So if we're able to interest the child, Montessori said this, in the universe, then we must not begin by giving them the basic facts, or to make them only understand one simple isolated mechanism, which is what a lot of education does. It only looks at one piece. We're trying to look at the whole. So with the ideas of the philosophical nature, one that is arranged in a manner that is most suited to the child's psychology, we need to use stories, because children love stories. And this is what's beautiful in elementary, is that we get to tell these fantastic stories, because these stories can sometimes have some elements of fantasy or imagination, but they're always grounded in nature. And that is our goal. In our Montessori environments, we really use our stories. So I see Jen has changed my task. So after early childhood and the children become the age of possibly elementary, or even at that bridge around 6 years old, they're now ready to find out, what is their cosmic task? What is their purpose? That's what elementary children want to know. They want to know, how do they fit in this big puzzle of life? These children will question a lot of things, and their questions always are from why and how. So why am I here? How can I make an impact? How, and this is as you're looking at the evolution of the elementary child moving into adolescence. They're trying to connect. You know, you hear them say, when I get older, I'm going to be a fireman, or when I grow up, I'm going to be an ecologist. So they come up with these thoughts because this whole time they're really thinking about their connection to the world and how they're going to fit into that world. So we use this storytelling to elicit questions with our students, to inspire their thinking, and finally to introduce a concept or idea, materials, and further research. So when we work with them, this is what we're trying to do. So anytime you can use a story, and I don't only mean a book, I mean tell the story from your heart. Sometimes you make up these stories, but we do have great stories that Maria Montessori made up, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But storytelling will always draw the interest and the imagination of the child. So introduce the great stories with purpose, and what does it look like for the child? So one of the things I like to say with teachers I work with is, if you only teach things in isolation, all we're doing is surface learning and surface teaching. If you plant a seed and you come back and you water that seed every once in a while with your children, then that seed will eventually grow. So then we're working beyond the basic process, and we're helping the child to develop something bigger, something beyond the most simple. So when I say that, plant the seed, come back and water it, it's like a spiral. So you introduce a concept. What if you're telling one of the great stories, and maybe you're talking about the first plants that appeared on the earth. So you're going to introduce that, but then you're going to come back with some other lessons and other work. It might be a week, it might be a month later. So you're continually watering the seed. And that's how we also teach interconnected learning, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So Montessori and her son, Mario, created these 5 great stories, or some people call them the 5 great lessons, the 5 great stories. And there are some other ones that other people have developed over time, but these are the original stories. They have names. The first one can be called the creation story. Some people call it the beginning of life, like beginning of the earth story. So in this creation story, we bring the before the universe ever existed to our students. And we talk about all the science that goes with it. So those of you that were looking in your questions and your statements when you emailed us, you were talking about the science and how to bring the cosmos to your students. This creation story is the one that does that. This is the one where you do a tremendous amount of scientific experiments. This is the story after you show it. It's very dramatic, where you can talk about the cosmos. And when you get into upper elementary 9 to 12, you get into like stellar physics and things I can't even pronounce actually. But there's a lot of higher level learning for students in that 9 to 12 program that are part of and come out of the creation story. The creation story, the beginning of history, the beginning of our world, also brings in the geography. So you're going to go all the way down with this story to the dirt and the earth. You do the landforms and the water forms. So all of that comes in because we talk about how the continents moved. And when did that happen? The history, the mathematics, how many years did that happen? And so that's kind of a small part of the creation story. And then we have the coming of life, or some people call it the timeline of life. It's a very large timeline. And it starts from before there was life. And the children see the eras, and they see the time that was put into each part of that timeline. Before there was life, when the first cells started to develop, what did those look like? How did they grow? What evolved? What didn't evolve? What died out? How things changed? And we can look at simple things that they can put into perspective in today's world when we talk about the coming of life. And in the elementary environment, just like in early childhood, we usually have a lot of animals and we have a lot of plants in the classroom or in the school for children to study and to watch. It's beautiful when some of those animals have hatch eggs, or when we look at the tadpoles. All of those things are very easy for anybody to do with children anywhere, is to study that cycle of life. This story also brings into perspective time for children. Time is very elusive for the youngest child. Until they get to be about 2nd and 3rd grade, it's a struggle for them to really grasp what that means when you say 5 minutes. They need markers, they need visuals to really understand. But we take children all the way back to what does your 24-hour day look like? Let's draw it. Let's imagine what you're doing every hour of the day. We also, in this time period, talk about evolution, and geography again comes in because plants and animals moved. And this time period showed us how they moved through time and where they moved and where they evolved. Then there's the coming of humans at the end of that. And these are all great stories. And these stories are beautiful. And if you get that book, To Educate the Human Potential, you'll see some of those stories in there. So this was the beginning of humans, and this is the scientific perspective. And where did they come from, and how did humans change over time, and where are we going now? That's a big question. Now I see some schools, they add on to their coming of humans timeline, or they have a coming of humans timeline 2, which is actually out there. Then there's the story of language, which depends a lot on the development of the hand, which we take that all the way back to the early childhood environment. That is what they're doing in there. They are helping and working to develop the hand, the fine motor skills. When we get to the story of language, children learn about the importance of writing and how the hand changed over time, and then how writing has changed, and prints have changed, and books and computers. And who knows what it will look like 10 years from now. And then there's math, and math brings in a lot of science. Where would we be without all of the mathematicians in the world, in our history? They have brought us a lot of information. They still bring us information. These are the things that our elementary children do. And I know families at home that also interconnect this work with students. When you're studying math, there are mathematicians that study the stars. Take your children outside, study the stars. If you're a classroom teacher, make a field trip where everyone comes together somewhere where they can look at those stars one night. Winter's a great time because you can see them earlier. If you wait until late spring or early fall, you have to wait because the days are longer. But this time of year is a perfect time to study stars. So making those connections and thinking outside of the box. What I want to say to you is, as Montessorians, we go through a very prepared training program, and we get a lot of information, but don't be afraid to step outside of what you get if you're in a training program or you're taking training, and be creative and trust your intuition, because sometimes that is when children will learn the most. If you're not afraid to step out and do these really fun things with your students. Okay, Jen, you want to?
Great.
All right, thank you. Change me over. Okay.
So just in looking at it, we like to come back to Montessori's words, and this is the words of her grandson, but Mario Montessori Jr. He says, in her philosophical outlook, man's cosmic task is to continue, collectively, the work of creation on Earth, to discover with his intelligence the endless latent possibilities of the world's creations and make them manifest in new forms. It is in this way that man creates his cultural environment. And goes on to say, human development is the result of an unconscious creative activity of the individual, and that this process is only possible in association with others. It is only the community that man's potentialities can be realized. This is the work of the child, guided from within by special sensitivities inherent to the various stages of development. And I think when we look at this, it's always important to come back to these words and remember again, back to the vision. And like Judy said, we're building up all the time and expanding, and not to be afraid to step out and really follow nature, follow your intuition, and also follow your observations. When we are observing the child, we are not just simply observing a child, we are observing really the development of humanity. So each of those unique movements, each of those pieces or phenomena of the day, it's all leading to something great, and we gain this great understanding. So I think that it's in the inspiration that we have to keep everything going, and in the beautiful stories, even in early childhood, each element that's on the shelf, there's only one of each one, because we are learning something that we have to wait our turn, and that everything's special. We have gratitude, and we are grateful for that we have. All of those elements are extremely important for the environment. So there is nothing that is placed in a way that doesn't have purpose. Everything has purpose, every human has purpose, and everything around us has purpose. And we want the children to really have that feeling.
Okay, so adolescence. This is the time when children are leaving elementary, and we won't spend a lot of time on this. This isn't Jen, and this is, we know some, but we don't teach this level. I've had this training, but this is a very important time, and you can see that this child, young adult, I want to say, but is working on a farm, and this is the time when Montessori said these children should be out and they should be on a farm. And if you're in a city and you don't have that option, then take them out into nature, into parks as much as you can, maybe field trips for days, few days on a farm. If you happen to be in a place where you can utilize a farm, I would utilize it often. If you're a mom or a grandma and you have children this age, take them to these places. They need to work with their hands again. Adolescents, if you know about Montessori's planes of development, are equal with the 0 to 6 plane of development. So a lot of things that are going on in their body were the same things going on with the children 0 to 6. And when Jen was talking about the pruning of neurons, that's happening for adolescents too. So they've built up a lot of neurons in their brain. And then this is a time period when the things that aren't used are going to be pruned away. So take them out. Their bodies are changing so much. They need to see the work of their hands. They need to touch the earth. They need to help things grow. It makes them feel good. And they also can see a product from the work that they're putting in.
Mm-hmm. And just to add to that, just like you said, really, it's in particularly that almost toddler correlation with the young adolescent. You can see that their bodies are kind of a little clumsy. They may be more hungry. There are a lot of things that are going on. Learning how to understand their body that is drastically changing, all of those things that are happening, and they have a need for movement, just like that toddler really has a need for movement. And their brain is just rushing with information. And sometimes you may ask an adolescent, what did you do today? And when they tell you, I don't know, they really don't know. It's gone because it takes time for everything to settle in, and they have so much going on. But also that need for community. So all that great community building that they've already learned through the infant and toddler up through early childhood and then elementary, now they're really building a working community. So if they have, for example, a greenhouse that they can be working on, really creating their own economy together, making applications to the community, the local community for funding, all of this. Now they're beginning to learn how to actually make a functioning society at a micro level. So it's very exciting that that's happening in the adolescent environment. So we're just going to talk just a tiny bit about, I mentioned before about the intangibles. So in the environment, you of course have that concrete environment in all levels, and it is designed around the needs and interests of the children. But it is that intangible part that's actually going to build your community. So you're going to have, creating a curiosity in the moments, enthusiasm, cooperation, respect, inner drive, reflection. These all are so necessary because if a child is to do something also without an experience and without being a meaningful member, a lot of the time it's not going to be remembered. Things that are remembered, things are stored in that short-term memory. And if they're actually going to be saved and be a long-term memory, there has to be experience around it. So we're always looking for truly our community builders, because you can have a child who's gone to school and gotten great grades and everything. That does not make them a good community builder or prepare them for caring for the universe and the earth in the future. did you want to add to that, Judy?
No, I think you're good. We're good. We're almost out of time, so I want to kind of be respectful.
Yes. So we're just about ending soon. I just wanted to bring in David Orr, who is a professor of environmental studies and really fantastic. And he just says, the plain fact is that the planet does not need more successful people, but it does desperately need more peacemakers, healers, restorers, storytellers, and lovers of every kind. It needs people who live well in their places. It needs people of moral courage, willing to join the fight to make the world habitable and humane. And these qualities have little to do with success as we have defined it. Let us keep that in our minds as we go further on.
So to just kind of bring this to a close, we thought about it and we thought of these questions. And so here's a few questions we have for you. And then this was where we'll have our discussion when we're finished here. So could the ultimate goal of education be to introduce children to the universe within their learning environments? Might the relationships that they have in these environments create a new human, and one who is really prepared for this ecozoic era? When I used to be in the classroom, my children could tell you right away that zoic meant life. So what does eco mean? So that would be something new that I might teach them. Montessori said, so we are created to evolve the cosmos. So that is our job. Every single one of us that are on this video right now, and those that are not, it is our job to support the creation of this cosmos for the future, because we're here now and we want it to continue. And perhaps humanity may have a vital role in this evolution.
And just to end in our reflective thinking, Rumi said, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop."
You will walk away with that thought.
I'm going to stop sharing now.
And recording.
I'm going to stop recording now.